Welcome to the Strange and Interesting Podcast, a podcast about folklore, the paranormal, urban legends, and pretty much anything else that I find strange and interesting. I am your host, Al. When we pass through a town, we imagine that it will be there for a while. There are homes, businesses, factories, stores, parks, and schools. It is difficult to think that a whole town and its population could disappear off the face of the earth, and even disappear from historical records entirely. Yet here in my home state of Wisconsin, there is a story about such a town that was once called Doveland. First, a little background. My wife introduced me to this legend. A member of a face group she is a part of posted a link to a 2022 article on Ranker.com called Doveland, Wisconsin, the urban legend of the town that disappeared. I had never heard of this legend, and as I read into it, I knew I needed to do an episode on it. Stories about cities disappearing have been around for a long time. Many people are familiar with some variation of the legend of Atlantis. The Old Testament has the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. There are also many historical examples. The city of Pompeii is a famous example of a city wiped off of the face of the earth due to a natural disaster. There is the lost colony of Roanoke. Sometimes an entire city will be abandoned, such as the ancient Native American city of Cahokia. The idea of a lost town has made its way into the world of creepypasta as well. One notable example is the town of Deepwood, Pennsylvania, which is a story I plan on doing for a future episode of Creepypasta Theater. Back in 2021, I wrote and produced an audio drama called The Lone Tree Tapes, which also features a story about a town that disappeared both physically and also disappeared from the historical record. According to modern folklore, the story goes that Doveland was a small town in Wisconsin. No one is exactly sure where this town was, but it is believed to have been located in the central part of the state. Depending on whom you ask, Doveland may have been a tourist destination, or it may have been an unremarkable small town. In any case, sometime during the early 1990s, Doveland disappeared overnight. The only proof that the town existed is a faded photograph of a man and two women sitting at a table in what appears to be a restaurant. Users on various internet forums claim to have souvenirs from Doveland, including t-shirts, hats, and coffee cups. Like any good urban legend, there are people who insist Doveland was real because they have elderly relatives who lived there. They remember going there as a child, or once they lived in or around Doveland. The website Obscurban Legends Wiki lists several theories as to what could have possibly happened to Doveland. These theories range from the plausible to the impossible. Most of the theories on the disappearance of Doveland are the stuff of science fiction movies and conspiracy theories. Some forum users claim that Doveland was a military town built in the 1960s to house soldiers and their families. The personnel stationed here may have been working on Project Sanguine. This project was conceived during the Cold War as a way to communicate with submarines that were too deep in the ocean to be communicated with by normal means. The plan was to create a grid of communication cables in the bedrock of Wisconsin, which would have covered about 40% of the state. This grid would have been powered by a series of underground bunkers equipped with generators, so in theory, it would be able to withstand a nuclear attack. The original project would have cost billions of dollars and was met with a lot of resistance. There was concern not just about the price tag, but also potential damage to the environment. Project Sanguine was downsized and became Project ELF. In this case, ELF is short for extremely low frequency, referring to a type of radio wave. The Navy constructed several such bases in northern Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. These bases were in operation from 1989 to 2004, which puts it in the approximate time frame for Doveland's disappearance. The most prosaic theory connecting Doveland to Project ELF is that the project was shut down, the base closed, and those who lived there simply moved elsewhere. Other internet forum posters have suggested the town was destroyed as a result of an unspecified scientific experiment gone wrong. Yet another theory is that the military did in fact start some sort of underground construction, but due to a mishap, the town was destroyed and evidence of the accident was covered up. If you do an internet search for Doveland, Wisconsin souvenirs, you will find places where you can purchase hats and t-shirts. Most likely, these are not authentic. It is believed that these images may have originally been generated by a bot based on a person's internet search history. After word of Doveland's disappearance began to spread, online merchants may have decided to create their own products to capitalize on the legend's growing popularity. The next theory is that a failing economy caused the town's residents to leave. Arguably, this is one of the more plausible theories. It also wouldn't be the first time a town in Wisconsin vanished for economic reasons. Many years ago, I went on a boat tour while vacationing in Wisconsin Dells. This city is a popular tourist destination located on the Wisconsin River. My dad used to call it the tourist trap capital of the world, though the Department of Tourism prefers to call it the water park capital of the world because it is home to several large water parks. The guide on our boat tour pointed out a place called the Ruins of Old Newport. During the 1950s, many settlers moved here to participate in the growing industry of the area, and the town of Newport was born. There were plans to build a railroad crossing through the town, but that changed, and the railroad was instead built through another town called Kilbourne City, just up the river. With this new construction in Kilbourne City, more businesses and more people started to move there. So the population of Newport moved, and the small town was abandoned. And as Kilbourne City grew, its name was changed to Wisconsin Dells. The same fate has the potential to befall mining towns and any settlement dependent on extracting mineral resources from the earth. After the resource is depleted, it is only a matter of time before businesses leave and the residents follow. This theory, while certainly realistic, does not make for a good story about a town that mysteriously disappears without a trace. When a town dies due to changing economic circumstances, the decline does not happen overnight. People leave gradually. We should still be able to dig up records telling us where the town was located and when businesses started to leave and when the town became essentially abandoned. We don't have any of these things for Doveland. A short article on the website for radio station Q98.5 called The Legend of Doveland, Wisconsin, puts forth a few ideas that Obscurbin Legends Wiki does not. The first two suggestions sound like the kind of stories a person might tell around a campfire. According to the article, a vengeful spirit cursed the city and its inhabitants. Other people have suggested that Doveland is merely hidden from view, but on certain nights, the town can be seen and its residents can be heard walking the streets. Moving from supernatural to scientific explanations, the same article suggests an earthquake or sinkhole is to blame for Doveland's disappearance. We can certainly chalk up both of these theories as nearly impossible. Wisconsin does have earthquakes, but since they occur deep in the earth, by the time the energy released reaches the surface, it is barely noticeable. This is not to say we have never had an observable earthquake in recent history. On May 6, 1947, residents in the Milwaukee area heard something described as an explosion. Some buildings suffered minor damage, but no injuries were reported. The earthquake measured 5 on the modified Mercalli intensity scale. This scale measures visible damage as opposed to energy released by the earthquake. A 5 on this scale is described as being felt by nearly everyone, some dishes and windows are broken, unstable objects are overturned, and pendulum clocks may stop. A 5 on this scale is roughly equivalent to a 4.0 to 4.9 on the more commonly used Richter scale. Sinkholes occur in Wisconsin as well, but due to the erosion-resistant rocks found underneath the layers of soil, sinkholes are usually small and shallow. If either of these natural events were responsible for Doveland's disappearance, I can guarantee that they would have been major news stories and there would be a record of it somewhere. Probably the least plausible theory to explain Doveland is that the town is a hyperstition, or an entity that somehow makes itself real by subtly influencing the world. Come to think of it though, since we have people making merchandise for Doveland, perhaps this theory might have a tiny bit of credibility to it. I have to admit though that if a town called Doveland did appear out of nowhere one day, I don't know if I would be amazed or scared out of my mind. If we take Occam's razor to the story, we can arrive at the conclusion that Doveland is simply an urban legend. Some people have suggested that stories about Doveland might be linked to a 2015 article in the Appleton Post-Crescent newspaper titled, "More than 1,000 Wisconsinites Reported as Missing." This certainly does sound like a scary headline, as it would seem to imply that 1,000 people in the state just vanished into thin air. In reality, the article is about several people who disappeared between 1992 and 2014 and was not meant to imply that all of these people went missing at once. The Ranker article points to posts from 4chan, Reddit, and Tumblr that date from 2017 and 2018. These are the earliest mentions I was able to find of Doveland. While reading through various articles, I came across two separate accounts that may have helped form the legend of Doveland. There was a small town called Werner that was intentionally flooded in the 1920s due to the construction of a dam. There is also another town in the state called Delavan. The theory is Doveland might be a misspelling of Delavan, and this name was connected to the flooding of Werner. This theory, though, would only help inspire the legend, not explain it, as these two locations are over 130 miles apart. We also know that flooding of towns in order to make way for a dam is not unique to what happened to Werner. And as a side note, the residents of Werner were compensated for their property and moved out of the area before the flooding began. While we are on the topic of strange towns in my home state of Wisconsin, I would like to end this episode with a story I heard while on a scout trip with my Explorer post back in the mid-1990s. This tale doesn't involve Doveland, but when else am I going to have a chance to tell this story? One of the adult leaders told us the following story while we were driving up to northern Wisconsin for a rafting trip. I need to mention that, according to the person who told me this tale, it involves the friend of a friend, so we need to take it with a grain or two of salt. The story goes that a man was hiking across the state and he passed through a small town. Soon after arriving, he noticed something unusual. When he passed by a house, the people inside would close the drapes and act like no one was home. If he saw someone on the street, they would walk the other way or ignore him. He tried to go to a store, but when the shopkeeper saw him approaching, he locked the door and flipped the sign on the window from open to closed. Needless to say, the man left town as fast as he could. When he made it to the next town over, he asked one of the locals why the people in the town he just came from acted so strangely. The man was told the following. Several years ago, the priest at the local church claimed to have had a vision of the Virgin Mary. After this encounter, he began to teach things that were not a part of standard Catholic doctrine. Word of the priest's teachings made it to the Vatican, and the Pope warned the priest to stop. The priest refused, and in retaliation, the Pope excommunicated the entire town. Ever since that day, the residents avoided any interactions with people outside of their community. Now, of course, I doubt this really happened, and like Doveland, we can chalk it up as a creepy story. In any case, legends like these are certainly strange and interesting. So until next time, everyone, thank you for listening. You have been listening to a presentation of Point of Insanity Game Studio. Visit us on the web at poigamestudio.com. Follow us on Twitter at poigamestudio. Look us up on Facebook and email us at poigamestudio@gmail.com.